Before the nightmares, before the chemical plant smoke painted the sky sick green, Compton still had summer nights that smelled like street tacos and motor oil. I remember that night clear. A heat wave hanging over the block like it refused to leave. Neighbors posted on porches, somebody's speaker rattling old-school West Coast bass. Nobody had a clue the hood was about to become a battlefield between the living and the dead. If you ever felt like somebody watching you, even when the street empty, yeah, that's the feeling I had walking past the alley by the old liquor store. But I shook it off, thinking it was just a night breeze shifting trash bags. Truth was, the breeze had carried something else, something sour from the direction of the Watts Industrial Chemical Plant 3 blocks away. Deuce M's was posted outside the 110 Bloods mural, leaning against his matte red Charger, white tees sticking to his chest from the heat. He was 28, built like somebody who'd been through prison yard push-ups and Compton street wars, but tonight he looked distracted. His right-hand homie, Lil Tone, sat on the curb tossing dice into a Gatorade cap, losing imaginary money and talking trash to himself. Across the street, a few neighborhood kids chased each other with dollar store water pistols, their laughter echoing off graffiti tag walls. I walked up slow, still narrating in my head like I do, 'cause when the world starts feeling strange, you start telling yourself the story so you don't lose your mind. "He got you pacing, Deuce?" I asked. He side-eyed the horizon where the plant smokestacks blinked red against the twilight. "Nah," he muttered. "It's too quiet out here, even for summertime." Lil Tone laughed it off. "Ain't quiet, you just paranoid, big homie. Hood just taking a breath before the weekend pop off." At the far corner, a Crip set, the East Side Locks, held their usual spot near the corner store parking lot. Their leader, Trayvon T-Lock Banks, tall with icy eyes and a silver chain that clinked when he laughed, noticed Deuce watching. He raised his soda can in a fake toast, that silent gang sign gesture meaning, "We see you." No shots fired, just that simmering tension that made the air feel heavier than the humidity already did. What none of them knew was that inside the Watts Industrial Chemical Plant, a graveyard shift tech named Mr. Holloway was arguing on the phone with his supervisor about a leaky storage valve. In the middle of his rant, the pressure gauge spiked. Alarms chirped once, then died, like even the warning system held its breath. A hairline crack had started in a rusted tank marked Biohazard B17, dripping fluorescent coolant that hissed when it touched the floor. Back on the street, Deuce's younger cousin, Malik, 17, with dreads tucked under a red bandana, pedaled up on a squeaky BMX. "Yo, Unc," he called Deuce that even though they weren't blood kin. "You hear that weird siren earlier? Sounded like the Amber Alert, but shorter." Deuce shrugged. "I ain't hear nothing." I noticed, though, dogs had stopped barking on Rosecrans, and even the crickets had gone quiet like they listening to something we couldn't hear. You ever notice the scariest part of a night isn't the noise? It's when the hood goes silent all at once. I swear I felt the hair on my arms lift like it was reaching for answers. A single crow flapped across the power lines overhead, then vanished toward the industrial district. By 10:30, the kids had been called in, porch lights glowed behind iron bars, and the blood mural looked darker than usual. Lil Tone wanted to hit a dice game off Wilmington Ave, but Deuce waved him off. "Not tonight," he said, eyes still locked on the distant smokestacks. The wind shifted then, carrying a faint chemical smell mixed with something like rotten eggs. Tone wrinkled his nose. "Man, somebody's sewer backed up." I ain't answer. I was busy trying not to gag on a scent that felt wrong, like metal and mildew and something dying. At the same time, over by the corner store, T-Lock's crew started coughing, first one dude, then another. They joked about somebody blowing Chief smoke, but their eyes watered, and they wiped at their skin like it itched. A few of them decided to head toward the plant to see what's leaking, thinking maybe there was copper to steal. Midnight rolled in with no moon, only the orange street lamps buzzing over cracked pavement. A low mechanical hum drifted from the plant, louder than usual, like machinery working overtime under stress. I remember glancing again toward that direction and whispering, mostly to myself, "Something out there breathing hard tonight." Deuce heard me, and for the first time I saw real worry tighten his jaw. If you sitting there listening and you just felt the urge to check over your shoulder, trust that feeling. I felt it too, like a presence crossing the street but leaving no shadow. A little before 1 a.m., an ambulance howled down Alameda but never came back out. Sirens cut off mid-scream as if swallowed by the industrial zone. Deuce told Malik to head home early, not liking the vibe. Malik grumbled but pedaled off, wheels squealing when he turned the corner. None of us knew that at that exact hour, the crack in tank B-17 widened under pressure, spilling hundreds of gallons of glowing sludge into a rain-clogged storm drain that ran straight beneath the East Side Lock's hangout spot. The mixture hissed, turned black, and started to bubble like it had a pulse. Somewhere deep in the pipes, rats fled, squealing, then went silent. By 2 a.m., a thin green mist slithered out of the sewer grates near the corner store. A homeless man sleeping under the mural woke up coughing, eyes wide as he watched the vapor creep across the pavement like it was hunting. His scream never finished, cut short by a wet choking sound that even the night paused. If you still listening, type "mist" in the comments, because once the mist showed up, the hood we knew was over. By sunrise, the block smelled like rain mixed with burnt rubber. But no one mentioned the strange green haze still clinging to the storm drains. The kids thought it was fog from the night storm. Grown folks just shut their windows. But anyone who'd been out late swore the air felt thicker, like breathing through wet cloth. Sam stood on his porch watching the street as if expecting it to move on its own. Malik biked up again, red bandana tucked crooked, eyes red from Lakasuri. "Unc, I swear I saw a rat on Wilmington, big as a cat, and it ain't run when I threw a rock." Deuce brushed him off. "You dreaming?" But he kept his hand on the porch rail like he was holding himself steady against something unseen. Down on the lock side, T-Lock's crew looked rough. Hoodies still damp from last night, skin around their eyes grayish, movement slow like they partied too hard. One of them, a tall dude called Spider, leaned over the hood of a car, coughing up dark green spit. You ever see a man cough and you feel the street itself flinch? That's how it felt, like the block knew something was wrong before we did. By mid-morning, word spread about fish floating dead in the canal near the plant. The city blamed heat wave oxygen loss. Folks from the hood just said, "Ain't never seen catfish belly up that fast." The smell drifted all the way to Rosecrans, mixing with taco truck grease, until you couldn't tell hunger from nausea. Around noon, Deuce, Lil Tone, and Malik sat in Big Ray's barbershop, one of the few cool spots where AC still working. Clippers buzzed, barbers talking basketball scores, but the TV news at the corner played muted footage of flashing lights near the chemical plant. A banner scrolled, "Industrial incident under investigation." Nobody paid it much mind. Compton too used to warnings that never save us. While Deuce got his lineup, a man staggered past the shop window outside, shirt stained, skin ashy around his mouth. He bumped the glass hard enough to rattle the clippers, but kept walking, head tilted, like listening to voices nobody else heard. If you listening right now and your shoulders just tightened, you feel what I felt then. Later that evening, Deuce checked on his Charger, found faint green dust on the hood like pollen, but gritty. He wiped it with a rag. Rag came back streaked, black-green. "Man, that's from the plant smoke," Tone guessed. Deuce didn't answer, just tossed the rag into the dumpster like it burned. As sunset slid in, the green mist crept thicker out the storm drains near the corner store. It hugged the ground, crawling along gutters, pooling in potholes. A street dog sniffed it and whimpered, tail tucked, bolting out of sight. Kids playing double dutch outside froze mid-jump when the rope brushed the fog. Their mom snatched them indoors yelling about asthma. Inside his apartment, Deuce's grandmother, Miss Clara, 68, church hat still on, though service long over, sat by the window humming gospel under her breath. She told Deuce, "Child, that air ain't right.
I can feel the Lord telling me shut these windows. He obeyed without backtalk, because if the streets raised him hard, Miss Clara raised him wise. Across the tracks at the Locks hangout, T-Lock and Spider argued about hitting the late dice game. Spider's hands trembled as he loaded his pistol, sweat running cold despite the heat. When he bent to tie his sneaker, a vein in his neck pulsed green beneath the skin. T-Lock noticed, but said nothing, chalking it up to bad light. Around 9 p.m., a power flicker cut the street lamps for half a second. When they came back on, the green mist had thickened so much it looked like shallow swamp water at ankle height. Cars rolled slower through it, tires making sloshing sounds, though the street was dry. I swear we heard whispering inside that fog, like voices too low for words but heavy with intent. At 10, Miss Clara gathered Malik and Deuce in the little room and prayed out loud, voice trembling but firm. Lord, keep your blood on this house. Outside, something scraped along the porch step, slow dragged in 2 thuds, as if bare feet testing the wood. Malik peeked through the curtain and gasped. Ain't nobody there, but the fog is climbing the stairs. Down by the corner store, one of the Lock's youngest, nicknamed Peanut, disappeared into the haze chasing a runaway pit bull. His scream came back first, then silence, only the pit staggered out minutes later, whining, eyes filmed white. Deuce armed up that night, pistol on the table, baseball bat by the door. Lil Tone kept watch at the window while Malik streamed music low to drown out the sound of wind rattling the street sign. Every so often a thump echoed in the alley, followed by wet coughing that faded as if swallowed by the fog. Near midnight, a cold drizzle fell, though radar showed no rain clouds. The droplets carried faint green glints under the porch light. Miss Clara whispered another prayer, louder this time, her gospel hum rising over the distant coughs. In that moment, even Deuce, who never prayed since his brother's funeral, muttered amen under his breath. If you still listening, type fog in the comments, because when the fog touched the first body, it started to spread the hunger.
The third night arrived like a judge with no patience. The heat didn't break, just learned new tricks. The air tasted like pennies, and the green mist hugged the guttons like it had a lease. Sirens kept threading the distance toward the industrial zone, then vanishing as if the city swallowed its own screams. Inside Miss Clara's place, the curtains were pinned tight, the Bible lay open on Psalms, and Deuce M. sat with his pistol field stripped, cleaning it in pieces like prayer beads. Malik sprawled on the floor, pretending to watch cartoons but actually staring at the door. Lil Tone paced, 10 steps to the window, 10 back, talking low about moving stash money out the neighborhood just in case. Deuce didn't answer. He kept swiping the oilcloth along the slide, eyes far away. When Miss Clara's voice thinned mid-hymn, he finally looked up. "Child," she said, not taking her eyes off the page, "there's a tightening in the spirit. You can feel it?" Deuce nodded once. "I feel it." He reassembled the pistol slow, each click sounding too loud in the small room. Outside, a shopping cart bumped down the sidewalk with nobody pushing it. If you just felt your shoulders rise for no reason, that's how we lived those minutes, waiting for the next sound to explain the last one. Down by the corner store, T-Lock leaned on a newspaper box, trying to look normal. His crew looked anything but. Spider had on shades, though the street lamp struggled to light anything, jaw clenched like chewing glass. Peanut wasn't around. 2 others stood too still, heads tilted as if listening to something beneath the concrete. "Y'all good?" T-Lock asked, voice thin around an unlit cigarette. Spider didn't answer. He lifted his shades a fraction. The whites of his eyes had gone a swampy yellow-green. Meanwhile, at the chain-link fence of the plant, Mr. Holloway, the graveyard shift tech, argued hoarse into his phone. "I told y'all B-17's leaking into the drainage!" Lights flickered behind him. Somewhere, metal shrieked like a train grinding its teeth. The phone cut dead. Holloway stood alone with the hum of bad machinery and a wind that smelt like things the body shouldn't breathe. Back on Rosecrans, Deuce flipped the deadbolt and cracked the door to check the street. The mist had thickened to knee-height, curling like it took offense to every step a car made. A man across the way stood on his porch rail, arms out like he was about to dive into a pool that wasn't there. Deuce hissed, "Hey!" The man didn't blink. He leaned forward and toppled like a board, vanishing into the fog. There was no third,
just the quiet sucking sound of something welcoming him home. You ever hear silence get greedy? Like it ain't just the absence of noise, it's a mouth? That's what the street sounded like. Lil Tone swore under his breath. We can't sit here, D. If it's a leak, we go to the source, shut it, or the hood stays a slow cooker. Deuce didn't love the plan, but doing nothing tasted worse. He told Malik, you stay with Nana. Don't open for nobody, not me, not Tone, nobody unless you hear me say your nickname twice. Malik swallowed. What nickname? Deuce smirked for the first time in days. You know it. Say it, Malik insisted, trying to be brave. Triple O, Deuce said. Old inside joke from when Malik took 3 tries to open a juice box. The boy nodded, satisfied by the ritual. They stepped outside into air that clung like wet plastic. The mist lapped at their shoes with a cold that didn't feel like weather. Deuce could swear he felt a pull at his ankles, gentle but insistent. They cut down the alley toward Wilmington, where the locks usually posted. Halfway there, a noise like wet paper tearing crawled out of the fog. Tone froze. What was... The word died as a figure slid from behind the dumpster. It was Spider, or what was left of the man that answered to that name. His hoodie hung wrong, shoulders lifted like strings pulled him. His chest rose once every too long moment, as if breathing was optional now. His mouth was smeared dark, not blood dark, something else, the green-black pollen we first saw in the Charger. His eyes were wrong, pupils a smear, sclera tinted yellow-green, film like lake water. Spider? Deuce said, keeping his tone even, pistol low, safety off. You need a hospital, bro. Spider's jaw worked side to side, the way a man tests a tooth he know is coming loose. When he spoke, the voice sounded borrowed. Hungry. He took a step, the ankle bent too far without breaking. Another step, his head jerked toward Deuce like a dog catching scent. He smiled. It didn't reach anything human. If your skin just crawled, that's your soul telling you the rules changed. Tone whispered, back up slow. They did, until a second figure rose from the fog behind them, close, breath cold on their necks. Tone swung first, back cracking into a shoulder that should have dropped the man. The thing staggered, then rolled the shoulder back into place with a wet grind and came on. Shots aren't supposed to sound swallowed, but the mist ate the pistol thunder, turning it into a dull throat punch of noise. Deuce's first 2 rounds hit center mass. Spider barely paused. The third clipped his ear. No scream, just a blink like a fly landed. Head, Deuce muttered, memory spitting back 100 zombie movies he never believed. He aimed higher. The 4th round snapped Spider's head sideways. He staggered into the dumpster, slid down and sat blinking as if the world argued with him about whether to stand. Tone grabbed Deuce by the sleeve. We out! They ran, boots slapping wet concrete that wasn't wet, fog curling up their calves like hands. A block later, they almost collided with T-Locks, who burst from the corner store lot wild-eyed, shirt ripped, shouting, Back! Back! Behind them, 2 of his own lurched into view, skin gray-green, movements jerked by invisible strings. One of them had half a smile still stuck to his face like old gum. Deuce and T-Lock's eyes met, years of beef paused by something bigger. You bring that over here? Deuce snapped. T-Lock spat, breath fogging wrong in the mist. We didn't bring nothing, this mess found us. Behind him, Peanut stumbled out at last, shirt front shredded. He looked 13 suddenly. Trey, he rasped. T-Lock stepped forward, hand out. Peanut's eyes flashed river green and he sprang like a cat, teeth closing where T-Lock's wrist had been a heartbeat earlier. T-Lock swore, stepped back, then hesitated, love and horror fighting in his face. Deuce fired. The round took Peanut high in the cheekbone. He dropped. T-Lock turned on Deuce, fury punching through fear. That was my little... Peanut sat up. His jaw clicked into a new place. He smiled with lips that didn't ask permission. T-Lock's fury went out like a candle. Nah, he whispered, backing away. That ain't him. From the plant direction came a mechanical scream, the sound of a pressure valve failing. A green post rippled along the mist like wind across wheat. Every not quite living thing on the block lifted its head at the same time as if hearing a dinner bell. Inside now! Deuce shoved Tone toward this Clara stoop. T-Lock ran the other way, screaming for the locks to fall back. Old discipline finding his legs.
As Deuce hit the porch, something grabbed his ankle from the fog. It was a hand. Cold, slick, fingers too tight. He kicked free, stumbled up the steps, slammed the deadbolt twice. Outside, palms thud the wood like heavy rain. Beginning. Miss Clara didn't scream. She stood in the living room, holding.
The pounding on the door slowed as dawn's first weak gray light slid between blinds. All night the things had tested the porch, palms slapping wood, nails scraping like coins on glass. Deuce M stood by the peephole, pistol lowered but ready. Miss Clara had prayed until her voice cracked, still clutching the Bible with both hands like it held the hinges of the house together. The green mist hadn't gone. It only lay lower now, slinking around the steps like a soaking dog. Lil Tone's nerves rattled like dice in his pocket. "We can't stay holed up, D. Fool low, ammo low." Deuce rubbed his temple, scanning through the thin curtain for movement. Malik, Triple O, peeked from the hallway clutching a toy Nerf gun, trying to look brave. I told y'all before, sometime the smallest sound behind you at sunrise feel louder than thunder at night. From outside came muffled shouting. Deuce cracked the window just enough to hear voices calling names he recognized, T-Lock's crew. One voice begged, "We ain't sick, we need help." Tone cursed under his breath. "They locks. Could be a trick." Miss Clara shook her head slow. "Could be souls needing saving before they gone for good." Deuce risked the peephole again. 3 figures stood in the mist just past the curb, hands raised chest high, palms open. Front was T-Lock himself, shirt torn, red smear on his arm that looked more like bruise than bite. Behind him limped 2 others he kept steering forward. The mist curled around their ankles but didn't seem to climb their legs as if it was deciding. Deuce unbolted the door halfway. "One wrong move and y'all meet daylight quick," he warned. T-Lock nodded. "Ain't here to bang. We losing homies by the hour. They ain't dying. They changing. We need a safe spot to plan." Tone hissed through his teeth but stepped aside. Deuce motioned the men with a chin lift. Blood and Crip under one roof for the first time since nobody remembered. Inside smelled of gun oil, candle wax, and Miss Clara's menthol rug. T-Lock lowered himself to the arm of the couch, breathing hard. He said flat, "Spider's gone. Peanut too, but they still walking." Malik froze mid-sip of water. "Walking where?" he asked in a whisper. T-Lock looked at him dead-eyed, toward the living. Lil Tone checked the bite-like bruise on T-Lock's arm. Skin wasn't broken. "You lucky," Tone muttered. T-Lock shook his head. "Lucky ain't a word left in Compton." Outside, the fog thickened again, even though the sun climbed higher, as if daylight couldn't burn it off. We all heard it at the same time, a far-off wet moan, too deep to be human, rolling through the block like wind through hollow pipes. Miss Clara started another hum, voice trembling but steady on the words, "Though I walk through the valley." Tone whispered, "Keep her singing. It's like the walls breathe easier when she do." Deuce spread a street map on the table, old, coffee-stained, folded wrong at the corners. He traced the drainage lines Malik used to use as bike shortcuts. He muttered, "All them drains feed straight from the plant." T-Lock added, "We saw the first ones crawl out near the east gutter. They follow the fog like it's calling them." Miss Clara closed the Bible with a soft thud. "You cut the call at the root, or it'll keep recruiting." Tone suggested raiding Big Ray's barbershop for supplies, since the back closet had a first aid kit and a shotgun he had once seen tucked behind the mop. Deuce agreed, but warned, "We move quick, in daylight, mask zone, no breathing that mist straight." Malik piped up, "What about the corner store snacks?" Deuce forced a grin. "We'll grab some, Triple O. Can't fight hungry." They stepped out together, Bloods and Locks shoulder to shoulder, into a street that should have been loud with weekend traffic, but instead lay muted like a snow day scene, only painted green at the feet. Cars sat abandoned crooked at stop signs. A bus idled empty with hazard lights clicking in steady rhythm. If you ever walked through your own neighborhood and felt it watching you back, you know the weight we carried.
That big raise, they found the gate half rolled up, lock hanging snapped. Chairs knocked over inside, mirrors cracked, no bodies, only a trail of dark, slick footprints leading out the rear exit. Tone retrieved a dusty shotgun, checked the chamber, one shell already loaded, two more rolling in a drawer. Malik grabbed a handful of barber capes to rip into makeshift face wraps against the fog. On their way back, a distant figure lurched into view, man in a postal jacket dragging one leg stiff. They froze. The man's head twitched toward the sound of Tone racking a shotgun. He sprinted, too fast for that limp, mouth stretched open wider than it should go. T-Lock fired first, hitting shoulder. It spun but kept coming until Miss Clara's hum floated through the open window of the apartment. The creature faltered, staggered 2 steps, then retreated snarling into the fog like the song hurt his ears. Malik yelled from the porch, "Grandma, don't stop singing!" She nodded, voice rising stronger, though her hands trembled on the windowsill. Deuce muttered, "We just found our shield." T-Lock gave a grim nod. "Then we better guard the singer." That afternoon, they barricaded doors with flipped-over couches and a refrigerator dragged by 3 men panting in the humid stink. Tone drew crosses on window glass with cooking oil, half laughing at himself but not wiping them off. For a while, the block stayed quiet enough that Malik finally napped against the refrigerator barricade, clutching his Nerf gun like it worked. Near sundown, a church bell rang 3 slow chimes from somewhere deeper in Compton. Strange because no church nearby had a working bell. Each chime seemed to stir the fog, rippling it outward in rings no wind caused. Miss Clara's hum faltered for a beat as she glanced toward the sound. Deuce whispered, "Don't stop, Nana. Please don't." If you still listening, type truce in the comments, because that day, the hood's old enemies sat at one table, guns on the floor, eyes on the fog, praying the same prayer.
That bell didn't belong to any church still standing. 3 low chimes rolled through the hood like a funeral on repeat, and each note made the fog shiver. Miss Clara stopped mid-hymn just long enough to whisper, "Not from God," then picked the song back up stronger, voice shaking the blinds. Deuce M stood at the window, jaw set. On the couch, T-Lock wrapped a bandana tight around his forearm where that bruise bloomed like a storm cloud. Lil Tone paced with a shotgun like it was a metronome, counting down to something we didn't want to meet. Outside, the street had the stillness of a paused video. Cars frozen at crooked angles, newspaper pages plastered the curbs by dew, that green mist moving with a mind of its own. It coiled around the stop sign, then uncoiled, slinking east toward the plant with a patience that felt predatory. Malik, Triple O, picked from behind the fridge barricade. "Why a bell?" he asked. Miss Clara didn't look away from her Bible. Some doors opened by keys, some by sound. T-Lock glanced at Deuce. "We go to that plant, we end this." Deuce didn't argue. He just started packing a backpack like a man who'd already decided. Flashlight, duct tape, extra mag, bottle of water, 2 bandanas. Tone pulled a broken barber mirror from the bag of shop loot. "Keep this. See behind corners without putting your head out." T-Lock smirked despite the fatigue. "You clever when you scared." Tone grinned crooked. Fear got a PhD. From the pipe mouth, a roar of air shoved back at them, a breath from the understreets, blowing mist out with it, carrying cold so sharp it felt like knives. The bell's bolts started to turn on their own, backing out, vibrating to leap. Holloway slammed the glass with both palms, mouthing it again, clearer. Symbols. Deuce squinted through the vibration blur. The carvings weren't random. They formed a pattern like a river running through 3 cities, each city a circle cut by triangles. Miss Clara's voice floated in his head. Some doors open by keys, some by sound. Keys could be shapes, sound could be silenced. Deuce snapped. "Tone, mirror." Tone angled the barber mirror to catch the bell's face while staying off-center. If you just glanced over your shoulder, that's the same twitch Deuce felt, like the room was staring back. In the reflection, he caught what naked eyes missed, a thin seam of darker brass where the symbols met, hairline fine, like a lidded eye. "Hit the scene with oil," Deuce ordered. Tone swiped the cross again, dead center of that line. The home dipped lower, then hiccuped, stuttering like a bass line with a blown speaker. The creatures faltered, heads cocked the wrong way, jaws working air. T-Lock cranked the wheel to hip height, tendons in his neck jumping. The sluice gate finally cleared a rust ridge and lurched up another foot. Now the flow roared, dragging the green-black sludge into the main outflow. The bell rattled so hard the bracket groaned, one bolt skittering halfway out and pinging off the floor like a spent casing. "Holloway," Deuce shouted, "how we kill it?" The tech pressed his forehead to the glass, eyes filmed green. He whispered, "You don't kill it, you unbind it." He pointed a shaky finger. "The triangles. Break the river line in 3 places." Deuce flipped the knife, snapped the blade open. "Cover me," he ordered. He stepped onto the narrow lip beneath the bell. Tone held the mirror up so Deuce could see without staring into the humming brass. T-Lock shouldered the shotgun, guarding the door where silhouettes clustered, twitching with hunger and uncertainty. The blade kissed metal, sparks spat green. The hum climbed, drilling into molars. Deuce carved a quick notch across the first triangle's river line. The bell jolted like a living thing, the room's air bucking. The nearest creature, postal jacket, shrieked and slammed into the doorframe, as if yanked by wire. It dropped, crawling, but slower now, like its instructions came late. 2 more, Deuce growled. He slashed the second break. This time the brass screamed without sound, pressure exploding inward like a silent thunderclap. Light strobed. The fog recoiled from the floor as if a giant lung inhaled. From above, something heavy fell. Catwalk boat? Clanging down the stairwell like angry footsteps. You ever hear quiet grab your throat? That's what the room did as Deuce went for the third cut, the hardest one, high on the rim. He stretched, shoulder burning, knife tip skittering. "Now, boy," Miss Clara's memory voice said, calm as Sunday. Deuce drove the blade through the last line. The bell stopped. Not a fade, not a diminuendo. Stopped like a switch. The bracket spat its remaining bolts. The bell slumped sideways and hung dead, swinging once, twice, whispering a dry clink that sounded human only by accident. The effect hit everything at once. The creatures swayed like drunk men denied a bar's last pour. Their eyes, river green a moment ago, clouded chalky, then rolled white. Some collapsed boneless, twitching like fish out of water. Others staggered backward as if a leash had been cut. The fog peeled away from ankles and gutters, lifting in shreds, looking suddenly less like a living thing and more like smoke after a bad electrical fire. "Gate," T-Lock roared. Tone and Deuce cranked together, backlit by emergency strobes. The sluice rushed like a busted hydrant now, dragging the toxic runoff with it. Deuce flung the oil bottle at the bell's dead face for good measure. The drops clung, then slid like tears on old metal. Holloway sagged against the glass, relief and something else, sorrow mixing in his face. Deuce shouldered the access door. It gave on the third hit. The tech stumbled into the chamber, gagging, hands shaking. Up close, his skin looked wrong, veins tinted faintly olive, capillaries spidered in his sclera. "You good?" Deuce asked. Holloway nodded, then shook his head. "I've been breathing it for days. I'm not what I was," he rasped. A low tremor shivered through the floor. Somewhere above, metal failed with a roar.
A pipe split behind the sluice, geysering clean water. City main bursting under stress, pouring into the channel and flushing what remained of the sludge outward with a victorious hiss. The lights steadied. The air lost its penny taste, keeping only the bite of bleach and hot wire. The doorway filled with bodies, still and wary. T-Lock and Tone raised guns, but the figures didn't charge. They swayed, blinking like sleepers mid-nightmare. One in a corner store apron croaked a sound that might have been help or just breath trying on a word. Another clutched his head and rocked, keen and low, as if the bell had left the phantom ringing inside his skull. "Back out," Deuce ordered. "Low, slow, keep eyes up." They eased into the stairwell, Holloway between them. At the landing, something slithered along the wall. Only shadow, no body, as if the fog hated leaving and wanted one last lick. If your neck prickled right there, you sane. They broke daylight at the yard. The chain link glittered with dew instead of poison now. A breeze moved like a real breeze, not a breath from the underworld. Far off, Miss Clara's hymn still rose, thin but bright. Tone exhaled a laugh that didn't quite trust itself. "We did that." T-Lock leaned on the fence, sweat and fog mixing on his brow. "We ain't done. Street's still sick, but that was the heart." Deuce scanned the skyline. Compton looked bruised, but breathing. "We get back to the block, check Nana, then we sweep. Bloods, lokes, don't matter. We pull the living together, and we burn the rest." Holloway swallowed, voice barely there. "There's still the tanks. B-17's not the only one." Deuce nodded once. "Then we keep cutting lines till the river's gone." They moved out, weapons low, eyes sharp. On Wilmington, the bus door still hung open, but now the single shoe rested in the street a few feet further, like its owner had stood up and walked. No bodies, just a silence that felt less hungry. At the corner store, a lock in the torn hoodie stared at his shaking hands, then at Deuce and T-Lock walking shoulder to shoulder. He didn't raise a set, he raised a hand. Deuce lifted his back. Miss Clara waited on the porch, throat raw, hymn cracked down to whisper. Malik slept against the fridge barricade, Nerf gun still in his fists. When Deuce stepped inside, Clara pressed shaking fingers to his cheek and smiled like sunrise. He told her in a voice he saved for baptisms and funerals, "The bell is dead." She closed her eyes and breathed, "Good." Outside, a last ribbon of green mist uncoiled from underneath the porch as if reconsidering life. Miss Clara tipped the final drop of oil onto the threshold and spoke plain, no tremor now. "You ain't welcome." The ribbon frayed, then vanished into ordinary air. If you still listening, type "bell" in the comments, because once we silenced it, the dead stopped marching in rhythm and started to wander looking lost.
Morning after the bell fell silent, Compton streets looked like somebody hit pause on a war movie. Cars sat at odd angles, glass dust glittered in gutters, a couch still smoldered at the corner where somebody tried to burn infected clothes. The fog had thinned into ragged wisps to slid off with the breeze, but the air kept a faint copper tang. Deuce Eames stood on Miss Clara's porch, scanning east and west, pistol loose at his side, eyes hunting for movement that didn't belong. The uneasy truce between Bloods and Locks had survived the night. T-Lock limped up the porch steps, arm wrapped tighter in fresh gauze Malik found in the first aid kit. "We lost Spider, Peanut, half the set," he said flat, like reciting grocery loss. Deuce didn't flinch. "We all lost. Difference is we still breathing." Miss Clara handed each man a paper cup of instant coffee, steam carrying menthol and scripture in the same breath. If you listening right now and felt the hairs on your neck lift, that's the same ghost draft that swept the porch, like the block exhaled through the storm drains. Tone came down the stairs rubbing sleep from his eyes, shotgun slung lazy but close. Whole hood smelled like burnt pennies, he muttered. Malik, Triple O, peeked over the banister with whisper serious. I dreamed the mist crawled back up through the bathtub drain. Miss Clara crossed herself without a word. They needed to bury the ones they had put down, homies, neighbors, strangers, before the heat turned them to rot. Nobody trusted the city morgue truck to show up. T-Lock suggested the vacant lot behind the old rec center, where the ground stayed soft after last week's rain. Deuce nodded once. We do it quick, before noon heat. The procession looked wrong. Bloods in red rags, locks in faded blue, walking shoulder to shoulder, pushing 2 wheelbarrows lined with tarp. No one talked. A straight pit bull padded alongside, ears back, whining low like it knew the names in the barrows. Malik marched between Deuce and T-Lock, clutching a folded Bible Miss Clara had loaned him, jaw set like a soldier in miniature. At the lot, the earth smelled wet and honest. They dug in shifts, Tone and a lock named Rico taking first round, shovels biting mud with the sigh of damp paper tearing. Deuce kept lookout from the rusted jungle gym, pistol balanced across his knees. Overhead, a torn basketball net flooded from a pole, catching the breeze with a faint metallic squeak that sounded almost like a child's laugh far away. As each tarp-wrapped body lowered in, Miss Clara's hymns floated from a Bluetooth speaker set on a brick, voice cracked but steady. Swing low, sweet chariot. T-Lock stood stiff at Spider's bundle, lips moving without sound. When it was Peanut's turn, he crouched a moment, pressed 2 fingers to the top where the boy's shoulder would have been, then straightened without wiping the moisture from his face. The city stayed too quiet. No traffic growl from the freeway, no ice cream truck jingle, just wind shoveling dust around broken glass. Tone whispered, feels like we burying the set itself. Deuce answered low, maybe that's what needed burying. By noon, the graves were mounded and marked with spray-painted initials on scavenged plywood. Malik planted his Nerf dart in the dirt like a flag. Miss Clara murmured a prayer over each marker, oiling the boards with her thumb. As she finished the last blessing, a gust stirred the piles of ash near the lot's edge, ash that had been clothes, rags, maybe even more than clothes, swirling briefly into a red and blue spiral before the wind scattered it flat. Tone muttered, even the wind can't pick a side. Back at the house, plans shifted to survival. Deuce spread the street map again. Fog's gone, but tank's still leaking. If more drains spit out that green mess, we right back where we started. T-Lock traced with a calloused finger. These 2 sewers feed straight to the riverbed. If it hits there, whole South L.A. get baptized in poison. They formed 2 patrol crews, one blood-led, one lock-led, both mixed to keep peace. Miss Clara would hold the block like a sentry tower. Her hymn had already proved it could make the fog hesitate. Tone suggested salvaging gas cans, bleach, and road flares to torch any pockets of sludge they found. Malik wanted to come, but Deuce told him no, but let the boy be radio man, guarding the porch with a walkie-talkie and more courage than sense. Afternoon heat turned the sky dull brass. A news helicopter finally flew overhead, tilting for a look, then banking away fast toward downtown. No rescue, just curiosity. The crews moved street to street, overturning trash bins, sealing storm drains with plywood and duct tape, spraying bleach lines like crude borders against whatever residue seeped. Mid-sweep, they passed a burned-out sedan still idling, though no key sat in the ignition. Engine clicking low, radio hissing white noise. T-Lock mashed the antenna off with a shovel. The static stopped. Tone said under his breath, whole hood haunted by science experiments. Near the corner liquor mart, they found 3 half-melted hazmat barrels leaking black streaks into the gutter. Deuce ordered the crews back, soaked a rag in bleach and tossed it on the stream.
It hissed, but slowed the ooze. They rolled the barrels upright, braced them with bricks, spray-painted skulls on them as warning. On the walk back, the shadows grew long, and more than once Deuce caught movement just outside his peripheral. Too quick, gone when he turned. Maybe nerves, maybe not. At one point, the pit bull kited ahead, then froze, hackles up, growling at an empty storm drain before slinking back to Deuce's heel. By sundown, they sealed 7 drains, torched 2 sludge pockets, and reclaimed 3 blocks. Bloods and Locks fist bumped without words. Miss Clara watched them return through the porch screen, her hymn soft now, almost a hum, but enough that Malik smiled in his sleep on the sofa, clutching the walkie-talkie like it worked magic. Deuce stood at the porch rail, looking down Rosecrans toward the dark silhouette of the plant. The breeze finally smelled only of asphalt and fried chicken from a late-night truck 2 blocks over. T-Lock joined them, resting forearms on the rail. He asked, "We still enemies tomorrow?" Deuce didn't look over. Tomorrow ain't promise. Tonight, we breathe. If you still listening, type ashes in the comments, because that night, Compton's toughest sets buried their dead side by side and called the truce holy ground.
At dawn, Deuce M's gathered the mixed patrol on Miss Clara's porch, bloods and faded red, lokes and washed-out blue, faces gray from sleepless nights. A thin coastal fog slid in from the L.A. River, but stayed high, not the green mist, just morning breath. The real danger was underfoot. Runoff from the chemical plant, still creeping unseen through the storm drains toward the riverbed. He said, "We cut it off at the mouth," tapping the map's fat blue line of the river channel. T-Lock spat over the rail. Hope it don't bite back. Malik, Triple O, sat on the porch step, cradling the walkie-talkie like it was duty, solemn as a 10-year-old could be. Miss Clara rested a palm on his shoulder and blessed each man going out. Oil cross, whispered prayer. She told him, "You burn what still breathes wrong, and you block what still leaks." Tone patted his bleach-stained backpack, the nozzle of a road flare poking out like a warning finger. They rolled out in 2 battered pickups and an old landscaping flatbed. The streets felt less haunted now, but not healed. Boarded storefronts stared like blind eyes. Bus benches still held abandoned bags whose owners never came back. A billboard over Rosecrans flapped half-torn, its smiling fast food mascot grinning too wide above the silence. If you've ever crossed an empty city at sunrise and felt like somebody's footsteps landed 1 beat after yours, you know that hush. Tone kept glancing at side streets where shadows lingered too long before sliding away. The convoy reached the concrete trench of the Compton Creek riverbed, water running shallow but quick toward the L.A. River. Graffiti still tagged the sloped walls, old set names sprayed over by new, colors bleeding into each other like a long feud caught in rain. The stench hit first, chemical sweet with an undernote of rot. Patches of green-black algae floated in swirls that pulsed as if breathing. Deuce split the crews, one to sandbag the north drain outlet, the other to follow the trickle upstream and trace where the contamination poured in. T-Lock stayed with Deuce upriver, leaving Tone to supervise the sandbag wall. The pit bull scout padded ahead, tail stiff, ears flicking at sounds in the culvert tunnels. Half a mile in, they reached the collapsed service bridge, metal ribs jutting from broken concrete. Something had nested beneath the slab, piles of damp rags, gnawed plastic bottles, and a shape that looked too much like a human arm until closer inspection showed rubber glove wrapped in slime. The pit bull growled low, hackles sharp as wire bristles. The men fanned out, Deuce scanning with flashlight, beams slicing through gaps under the bridge. A faint drip-drip echoed hollow against the culvert walls, then stopped without reason. You ever realize silence has timing, like it waits for you to notice? That's how it felt. T-Lock spotted a narrow storm pipe gushing faint green-tinged water into the creek. He said, "There's your mouth." They followed it to a maintenance hatch half buried in weeds and rust. The lock was fused by corrosion.
Deuce pried it loose with a crowbar. The hatch moaned open to a steep ladder dropping into dark where the smell turned sharper, like spoiled batteries. Inside the tunnel, the walls sweated, and the floor carried a thin current of glowing runoff. Every so often, faint chalk marks showed where the city once measured flood levels, now smeared by streaks of something darker. A spray-painted crown symbol marked one wall beside the words, "Lord's Return," set tag turned prophecy graffiti. They sloshed forward single file, Deuce leading with flashlight, T-Lock behind carrying 2 road flares like torches. A cross tunnel opened on the left, breeze flowing out colder than the rest. The pit bull froze there, teeth showing. Deuce crouched, light cutting inside, saw only deeper dark until a ripple passed across pooled water though no stone had fallen. He said, "Keep moving." Some doors were better left unopened. The main pipe widened into a drainage chamber where an iron grate filtered larger debris before the water reached the creek, but the grate was bent, bars pried outward like something had crawled through. Around the bent gap, the concrete was scarred by claw marks too high for any stray dog. T-Lock muttered, "Ain't no rat did that." They set to work. Tone's crew above lowered down sandbags tied with rope, stacking a temporary dam in the pipe to halt more sludge. Deuce uncapped a bleach bottle and doused the grate, white foam sizzling where it touched the slime. The smell made eyes water, but the green pulse dulled a shade. While T-Lock hammered a bent bar back in place with the butt of his flare, a splash sounded upstream. Deuce swung the light, nothing but ripples chasing themselves. Tone called down, "Frogs?" The pit bull's growl said otherwise. A shape rose half submerged against the current. Humanoid shoulders slick with algae, head bowed under water-dripping lokes. It straightened slow, green runoff pouring from its sleeves. Eyes opened, river green glow bright even in the flashlight's beam. It lunged for the pit bull first. Deuce fired twice, rounds punched chest, barely slowing it. Tone above struck a flare, tossed it down. The thing flinched at the hiss of firelight, stumbling back into the flow, but not sinking. He said, "Flare the water." T-Lock jammed a second lit flare into the shallow current. The creature screeched, a sound halfway between rusted hinge and deep water wail, before slipping downstream out of sight, smoke trailing from a scorched shoulder. They sealed the bent grate with steel cable scavenged from the collapsed bridge and packed more sandbags tight. The bleach-streaked water lost its glow, turning ordinary brown as it pooled behind the dam. For now, the leak was blocked, but everyone sensed the creature had only retreated, not died. By late afternoon, the crews climbed back to daylight, faces streaked with grime and river silt. On the levee wall, someone had spray-painted overnight in dripping green letters, "B-17 lives." T-Lock spat again. "Tagger's got jokes." Deuce wiped sweat with his bandana. "Ain't no joke. Means we still at war." They loaded up tools and bleach bottles. Pitbull curled at Tone's feet on the flatbed, ears twitching every time water gurgled in a gutter. Overhead, the billboard mascot's torn half-face flapped in hot wind like it was smirking at them. Back at the block, Miss Clara waited with water jugs and fresh hymn on her lips. Malik rushed up announcing, "No fog all day, Nana." She smiled, but told Deuce, "The river isn't done speaking. I heard it in my prayer." Deuce kept that to himself. Some warnings you don't repeat to the crew before dinner. If you're still listening, type "river" in the comments, because we damned the poison for a day, but the water remembers its own path.
The day we dammed the river felt like a wind nobody trusted. By dusk, the heat leaned on the city again, and the sky turned the color of a healing bruise. Deuce M's cleaned his pistol on Miss Clara's porch steps, while Malik, Triple O, drew chalk crosses on the walkway because Nana said, "Put the sign where your feet forget to pray." T-Lock sat on the rail staring at the plant's silhouette. The pit bull slept like a coiled spring by the door. Peace wasn't peace. It was an inhale we knew the night would tax. The first hint came from the power lines, a humming too steady, like someone tuning a bass note no human ear wanted. Street lights flickered twice, held,
then died block by block like dominoes falling toward us. The last glow on Rosecrans strained, sputtered, and blinked out. In the sudden dark, the neighborhood looked like a mouth missing teeth. You ever hear a city go quiet so fast your ears ring? That's how the blackout hit, like someone cupped hands over Compton's face. Then, in the hush, voices. Not close at first. A chorus, drifting from the industrial side. Human words said wrong, syllables rearranged like they'd been learned phonetically in hell. Miss Clara stood, Bible already open, like she never closed it. She told Malik, inside. He hesitated, chin set. She didn't raise her voice, just touched his cheek, and he went. Deuce slid the deadbolt, but left the chain so he could look through the gap. The street wore shadow like clothes. Somewhere metal clanged, dumpsters maybe. Then a laugh, not cruel, empty. Generator? Tone asked. Deuce shook his head. Noise draws. They passed flashlights to Miss Clara and Malik, but set them face down on the table, beams dim. In the low cone of light, the room felt tight as a rib cage. T-Lock cracked the window for air. That's when the voices came closer, layered and offbeat. Deuce. Deuce M's. Open up. The first time hearing your name from a mouth you don't know, every instinct thinks friend. Your bones know better. It said Tone's name next, then Nana's, then Malik's nickname, Triple O, stretched into a gurgle. The chain on the door thrummed without a knock, like the wood breathed in. If you just glanced over your shoulder, you're doing better than us. We were learning to stare at everything at once. Deuce peeped. The sidewalk was empty, but the chalk crosses Malik had drawn flaked outward, powder lifting in threats toward the threshold like dust in reverse. The voices moved down the block, 3 houses away now, mimicking another family's names, then another, a recruitment drive. The radio crackled, a walkie-wheeze from the kitchen counter. Tone snatched it. Crew 1? Static. Crew 2? A hiss, then a whisper. At the church. Not the church we remembered. The old storefront one on Wilmington with the crooked sign, New Bethel, letters missing, so it read N-E-B-E-T, survivors. And singing. The transmission dissolved in the wet clicks. We moved, Deuce said. Miss Clara set a jaw. I go. Deuce started to argue, but she cut him off with a look he'd respected since grade school. She said, they need the song. Malik stepped forward. I'm radio. Deuce squeezed his shoulder. Triple O, you hold the fort. You hear my voice say your name twice? Then open. No sooner. The boy nodded, clutching the walkie like a lifeline. They stepped into blackout air that smelt like summer and substation smoke. The moon hadn't risen yet. The city wore a velvet hood. Deuce walked point, Tone 3 steps back, T-Lock rear guard. Miss Clara moved between them, skirt hem whispering the rhythm of a hymn under her breath. The pit bull ghosted them at knee height, silent. The storefront church's door stood open, an LED lantern on a milk crate throwing weak light over bent metal folding chairs. Inside, a dozen souls, bloods, locks, aunties, and house coats, a mechanic still in coveralls, huddled in a half circle around a woman at a battered keyboard. Her fingers trembled, but stayed on the melody. Children's eyes shone too wide. A man with a split lip clutched a wrench like a cross. Miss Clara took in the scene and slid beside the keyboardist without asking, her cracked alto slipping under the melody like a foundation. The woman's shoulders eased. People started to breathe in rhythm. Deuce scanned windows. Black glass reflected their own faces back, but behind the reflection something smudged moved like fingerprints dragging on a mirror. We can't stay here, T-Lock whispered. This block sits in a bowl. Fog loves bowls. Tone was already moving chair stacks into a barricade. Give me 10 minutes and I'll love it less. Deuce checked side doors, one chained, one blown out. He screwed the blown one shut with a drywall screw and a prayer. A kid coughed, then asked too loud, "Are the monsters gone?" Everyone flinched at the word like it was an invocation. The first touch came soft, a fingertip trailing along the outside of the glass like somebody testing a cake. Then more. Patter-patter, dozens, rhythm matching the old bell's pattern like muscle memory. No bell, but the bodies remembered. The pit bull rumbled low. Miss Clara lifted the hymn's volume, and the air inside the church sharpened, like sound could etch a line in reality. You ever hear a glass decide what side of salvation you stand on? You can't know the pitch it hits right before it breaks. The glass bowled without shattering, then popped back. Once, twice. Tone tossed a road flare into the vestibule and cracked it. Red light bloomed ugly as an open wound, painting faces with devil color. The pawing paused. Then came a voice from directly outside the door, 2 inches of wood between the throat and your undoing. Nana, please. I'm cold. Malik's voice. Miss Clara didn't move. Deuce did. He signaled T-Lock to the side of the door and put his mouth near the chain gap. "Triple O," he said, calm as he could make it. "What'd I say before I left?" Silence. Then the same voice. Perfect. The way a recording is perfect. "Say my name twice." Deuce felt every hair on his arm stand. He said, quietly, "You got the voice wrong. He calls himself Radio Man." The mouth outside went still. Then it giggled. Not Malik's giggle. The window bowed again. Harder. "Basement?" Tone asked. Miss Clara shook her head. "Flooded last winter." T-Lock pointed up. "Roof." Deuce scanned the ceiling. Drop tiles, water stains, fluorescent fixtures dead in the blackout. He spotted a service ladder behind the pulpit. "We go up and across the rooftops to the alley, then back to our block. Move when the song hits the chorus. They hate the lift." Miss Clara nodded, eyes closed, breath steady. She signaled the keyboardist, "Modulate up." The chord rose like dawn. The bodies outside hissed, 100 broken radiators venting. Tone and T-Lock swung the door in a crack to jam a chair under the knob while Deuce boosted Miss Clara onto the ladder. She climbed with the carefulness of a woman who'd spent 50 years refusing to be fragile. The flock followed, one by one, hands shaking, but finding the rungs. The window finally spidered. A pale hand punched through, fingers searching for purchase, wrist bending too far without snapping. Tone slammed the flare against the sill. The hand recoiled, skin smoking where sparks kissed it. "Move," he barked, voice breaking. Roof air felt cooler, honest. The block, dark as a shut eye, stretched in both directions. Deuce helped pull people up, then hustled them toward the next roof, a tire shop with tar gravel crunching underfoot. Below, shapes pooled around the church door, heads tilted up as if listening for rooftop footsteps. T-Lock signaled silence, then pointed to a narrow plank bridge between buildings. Schemer's path teens used to jump rooftops for fun before fun died. They crossed single file while Miss Clara kept the hymn just loud enough to be a thread, not a banner. Halfway, the pit bull froze, stared hard at a rooftop AC unit humming wrong and growled. The hymn answered, pitched itself like a voice. The dog barked once, sharp, and the hymn cut off like it got embarrassed. Deuce patted the dog's neck. "Good soldier." From the alley came a shuffle, then a crash of cans. Something climbed. Deuce dropped to a knee at the parapet and aimed down. A face rose, half covered in sewer filth, eyes river green. It opened its mouth and 3 voices came out overlapped. "Deuce, Nana, Tone." Deuce fired. The head snapped back, vanishing. Far down the block, another voice answered in perfect copy of Miss Clara's hymn, half a measure late, wrong notes like teeth out of alignment. The copycats were learning the song. "We can't out-sing an echo," T-Lock said. "We outpace it," Deuce answered. 3 roofs, left at the pawn shop sign, then dropped to the alley behind our block. Tone glanced at Miss Clara. "Can you hold?" She smiled with all the steel God ever put in a grandmother. "Child, I've been holding this city since the riots. Go." They moved. Rooftop gravel chewed soles. A billboard ladder rattled under their weight, the mascot's torn face flapping above like a witness. Deuce counted heads at every jump. The last roof ended over a narrow alley. They dropped one by one, Tone first, catching Miss Clara like she was made of bone china and armor. The pit bull landed silent as a thought. Deuce came last, scanning the skyline. No fog, no bell, just darkness and breath, and the wrong kind of choir roaming up in the distance. They cut through the alley, past dumpsters where rats had gone quiet, past the mural of a haloed kid basketballing that looked too much like somebody they'd buried yesterday. The block rose like home from a nightmare. The house lights were still dead. The chalk crosses on the steps, however, glowed faint as if catching stray starlight. Malik opened at Deuce's double whisper, "Triple O, Triple O," and flung himself into Miss Clara's arms, shaking with sobs he'd kept dammed in. Inside, lanterns lit faces soft. People sank to the floor, some crying ugly, Some laughing the laugh people do when trauma gives them a hall pass for a second. Deuce shut the door, slid the boat, and leaned his head against the wood. T-Lock looked at Deuce across the room, old enemies measured by a new scale, and nodded once. We ain't lost yet.
The blackout held through the gray hours before dawn, when sleep feels like a rumor. The block breathed in shallow pools, neighbors piled on Miss Clara's floor, kids under blankets, the pit bull stationed at the door like a carved lion. Deuce M stood at the window, counting shadows that weren't there, until they were. T-Lock cleaned his pistol by lantern glow, hands steady because something in him understood panic is a luxury. Lil Tone threaded paracord through cabinet handles to hard lock the kitchen, then smiled at Malik for being brave enough to watch. Mr. Holloway was back too, slumped at the table with a sweatshirt hood shadowing his eyes. Up close, you saw the green threadwork beneath his skin, veins tinted olive like the fog had learned body language. He kept apologizing to the room under his breath. If I'd shut the valve sooner, if I'd called the county. Miss Clara poured him water, voice soft as gauze. Child, torment is not repentance. You're here now. Help us plan. Planning felt like building a boat on a river already hungry. Holloway sketched a square with a shaky pen, the plant, the drains, the feeder lines to the river, then tapped another smudge on the page. Substation at Willow and Santa Fe. Grid brains. If anything's still sending hum, it'll route from there. Deuce pictured the way the power lines had sung before the lights died, a sound too smooth to be accident. You saying the hum ain't random? Holloway winced. Sound rides infrastructure. What the bell did to bodies, the hum does to air. If you ever felt a room pay attention to itself, that's how the house changed when he said that, like the drywall leaned in. Somewhere outside, a metal lead kissed concrete, a manhole cover tapping in a small, patient rhythm. Deuce split the work. Tone and a mixed crew would hit the old pawn shop lot for gas cans and a portable generator they'd seen in the back room. T-Lock would take 3 locks and salvage floodlights from a tire shop. If the lights came up, maybe faces would show before teeth did. Miss Clara would hold a house with neighbors and a handful of bloods, turning her hymn into a low wall of air the monsters didn't like to climb. Deuce kept Holloway beside him as map and conscience. The street greeted the first steps with that blackout hush. No birds, no freeway, just the squeak of shoes and the distant drip of something you didn't want to name. Chalk crosses on the porch glimmered faint as if moonlight hid in the dust. The pit bull wanted to go, but Miss Clara called him back by name, voice like leash. Moses, stay. The dog obeyed, as if he understood the book. Tone's crew ghosted down Wilmington. The roll-up gate was half off his track. He eased it just enough to duck inside. Flashlights stayed hooded in palms. Rows of junk looked like relics now. DVD players no one needed. A glass case of watches. Guitars sleeping in hard cases. The generator sat at the back under a tarp, tagged with a price sticker that felt obscene. He rolled it out whispering, tax season. A set of jumper cables clattered, too loud for a room like that. He froze. Nothing moved, and then everything did. Something slithered behind the counter and breathed his name in 3 voices that weren't his friends. Tone didn't answer. He dragged a Jenny to the alley while 2 homies stuffed gas cans in a milk crate. The whisper followed, never closer than the edge of light. Just outside, a shopping cart tipped on its own and rattled away as if leaving a seat for something with no legs. Tone's laugh sounded like a cough. Hustle, y'all. T-Lock's team hit the tire shop. The front door had already been pried. They slipped in and went straight to the back where shop lights hung on hooks. He whispered counts. 1, 2, 4. His favorite number used to be 3. Now it was even. He remembered Spider's eyes the second before Spider wasn't Spider and burned that memory down to ash. When he lifted the 3rd floodlight, a face rose behind the workbench glass like a bad Polaroid developing. River green eyes, thug smile, lips mouthing, Trey.
It was Peanut, or a mirror. T-Lock didn't flinch. "You dead, little man," he said softly, and took the floodlight anyway. Back at the house, Miss Clara formed the room into a half-circle like church, but tougher. Neighbors, aunties, 2 locks holding babies whose mouths needed quiet. She led them soft, not dramatic. Her voice rolled along the floorboards like smoke from the right fire. Malik, Triple O, sat by the window with the walkie-talkie and a Nerf gun he understood was pretend, but he held it like duty. Mr. Holloway stood at the sink, staring at his palms as if someone had written a confession in veins. The first copy arrived at the stoop. "Nana." It sounded like Malik pretending to be polite for the school office. The chalk cross turned to powder strings and lifted toward the gap beneath the door. Another voice came layered underneath, older, with that tired boy bravado. "Deuce, open up. It's just me." Whoever me was, it had never stood in this house. Miss Clara didn't argue with doors. She sang at them. The pull on the chalk unraveled and fell back to dust like a trick with no magician. If you never heard 100 throats rehearse your names in the wrong order, count yourself blessed. The copy choir passed up and down the block, testing each household's memory. It wasn't loud, but it stacked, a low swell like tide becoming policy. Something, many things, scraped the manhole lid again. Patience tapping. Tone returned with the generator strapped to a dolly, gas sloshing. T-Lock followed 5 minutes later with the floodlights, cords coiled like snakes across his shoulder. They set the Jenny in the kitchen by the open window, fed exhaust outside, crossed cords to the living room, and thumbed the choke. For a second it coughed like a dying animal. Then it caught. A yellow cone of light poured into the room like false sunrise. Faces tilted toward it, warming their fear. "Aim 2 out the windows," Deuce said. They propped floodlights on end tables facing the street. When the beams hit the front yard, the copy voices shifted key as if adjusting to new truth. Silhouettes drew back from the porch. A figure stood in full. Finally, postal jacket slick with dried river water, head tilted too far. The beam washed his face pale. Then he smiled like a family photo. Then the smile inverted without moving, and he sprinted for the door, stopped short at the chalk line, and shrieked so soft the shriek felt private. Holloway watched the way the silhouettes moved and frowned like a man reading a chart he wished was fiction. He said, "It's not random. They're listening for the hum. If the substation sings again, they'll be on one beat." Deuce nodded. Then we cut the singer. He looked at T-Lock. Old enemies had become verbs. "We go." Miss Clara caught his sleeve. "You'll need more than bullets to quiet a song." She handed Deuce her small bottle of oil, label half peeled, gave Tone a copy of Psalms folded until the paper felt like cloth, pressed a palm to T-Lock's cheek the way a mother pretends she can fix blood with blessing. Malik looked up. "Radio check?" Deuce bent. "You run the net, Triple O. If the copycats try your voice, ask them what you never told nobody." Malik hot it hard. "My middle name." Deuce squeezed the nape of his neck. "There you go." They moved fast toward Willow and Santa Fe, generator hum fading behind them until the street went back to Eaton sound. The substation slept behind chain link and barbed wire, banks of transformers hulking like dark cattle. A faint shimmer crawled over the metal, heat haze, though the air felt cold at the teeth. "Don't touch the fence," Holloway warned, as if anyone needed reminding. Even dead grids remember how to bite. A side service door sat ajar. Inside, rows of panels blinked with that patient emergency glow. The hum wasn't electric. It was else, like the bell's ghost figuring out a new throat. Holloway guided Deuce to a junction box stamped with county seal and dust. "Pull this and the redundancies sleep." T-Lock posted at the door, floodlight under his arm, beam ready to blind anything shaped like hunger. Tone unspooled cable, breath steady, the way a life gets measured in small competence when God puts your block on trial. If you ever heard 100 throats rehearse your names in the wrong order, count yourself blessed. The copy choir passed up and down the block, testing each household's memory. It wasn't loud, but it stacked, a low swell like tide becoming policy. Something, many things, scraped the manhole lid again. Patience tapping. Back at the house, Miss Clara formed the room into a half-circle like church, but tougher. Neighbors, aunties, two locks holding babies whose mouths needed quiet. She led them soft, not dramatic. Her voice rolled along the floorboards like smoke from the right fire. Malik, Triple O, sat by the window with the walkie-talkie and a Nerf gun he understood was pretend, but he held it like duty. Mr. Holloway stood at the sink, staring at his palms as if someone had written a confession in veins. The manhole at the center of the intersection ticked again, this time more deliberate. Not a knock, so much as a hinge. The chalk on the asphalt lifted in squiggly lines, then laid itself back down as if ashamed. Deuce, Tone, and T-Lock took positions without words, guns low, floodlights angling to pin anything.
Dawn slid in the color of old nickels. The blackout still held, but the block had learned how to breathe without electricity. Floodlights slept. Miss Clara's voice was sand and honey quiet, saving what strength she had for the next hard hour. Dusam stood on the porch steps tying his laces like a boxer before the bell. T-Lock checked mags he'd wiped down with oil and prayer. Lil Tone strapped a flare bundle to his backpack. Mr. Holloway watched the storm drains with a face that knew the river by first name. The asphalt under our feet gave one long rolling shrug. The manhole lids didn't pop, they sighed. Far off, deep as thunder, something turned over in his sleep. Holloway's pupils caught a sick green glint and then let it go. It wants the path back, he said. Bell's dead, hum is quiet, but water never forgets the way home. Miss Clara laid her palm on his chest. Then we asked the water who made it to remember him instead. The plan was simple the way desperate plans are. We'd hit the plant and the river mouth at the same time, cut the last tank, bleed the last pipe, and baptize the system in bleach and fire while a wall of song held the street. Bloods and Locks split into two crews, old enemies stitched into one purpose. Deuce took Holloway and Tone to the plant. T-Lock led the river team with floodlights, cables, and a righteous bad mood. If you just check your shoulder, that's wisdom. We stepped off and the city tilted its ear. The pit bull, Moses, trotted at Deuce's heel, nose twitching the damp metal smells. Miss Clara called after us, voice steady now, not a performance, but a promise. Let God arise, let his enemies be scattered. Neighbors echoed her line like they were hammering nails into daylight. At the plant fence, Dew jeweled the chain link like fake diamonds on thrift store gold. Inside, Tank B-17 sat slumped and silent, but further back, a sister tank, B-22, sweated a thin seam of green tears. Warning strobes blinked at patient red no one trusts. Deuce cut the chain, and the gate gave up without argument. The yard smelled like pennies and melted holes. Holloway's breath hitched. That's the mother line, he said, pointing to a fat pipe running shoulder high toward a concrete valve pit. Kill that, and we starve the grid. They crossed the yard low and quick. Tone popped the valve pit lid. Inside, 3 wheel handles waited like choices in a bad dream. Painted red, blue, and an unhelpful yellow. Holloway kneeled, fingers trembling above the bolts, whispering the labeling codes like a psalm only engineers know. Red is bypass, blue is purge, yellow is call. The metal hummed in agreement, even though the grid was dead. We all heard it, the old Bell's ghost learning to live in pipes. We cut yellow. Deuce wedged his crowbar, braced boot, and shoved till the handle groaned. The pipe shivered under their feet. Green seeped thin to clear. The hum dropped half a note like a choir losing its section lead. Somewhere beyond the yard, something angry splashed. One mean thrash big enough to send ripples down alleys we couldn't see. Back on the block, Miss Clara lifted the volume.
Neighbors formed a ragged circle in the street, chalk crosses underfoot like white constellations at their feet. Malik, Triple O, stood by the stoop with the walkie, voice tight but brave. Radio net live. When the manhole lids ticked, he didn't jump. He recited a verse Miss Clara had made him memorize when he was 7 and loud, and he said it like a spell. At the river, T-Lock's crew lowered floodlights from the flatbed, angling them down the trench so the concrete blazed noon at dawn. Sandbags built a second dam 50 yards upstream of yesterday's patch. The pit water steamed under bleach pour like sin argued with chemistry. A shaped surface mid-channel, shoulder slung with river grass, dreadlocks dripping, eyes dimmer than last night, but still wrong. T-Lock didn't fire. He clicked the light to full, and the thing skulked back, palm spidering across concrete like it wanted to climb out of its own skin. You ever hear a city hold its breath across 2 miles at once? That's the sound when both crews pulled levers. Deuce spun the purge wheel at the plant. T-Lock kicked the last sandbag into place. Water raced where it wanted, poison lost lanes. The river bucked once, twice, then ran clear in strips like clean thought threatened bad memory. That's when the monster came, boom, no tiptoe, no hint, out the valve pit like a jack-in-the-box sent by hell. A torso first, then the rest, shoulders banging concrete, mouth yawning too wide, teeth like bottle glass jammed in gums. Its eyes lit river green, full bright now, because it wasn't one body. It was many, a colony, wearing men in runoff like a suit. It hit Deuce square, slamming him back into pipework, breath gone, vision starry. Tone moved on instinct, flare in his fist, jamming red fire into the thing's cheek. It shrieked a sound that made the yard boats rattle, then snatched Tone by the wrist and flung him into a drum. Holloway leapt, yes, the quiet man, shouldering into the mass like a linebacker who forgot he was 50. The monster folded around him, curious, then convulsed as oil from Miss Clara's bottle smeared onto its skin from Holloway's palm. "In Jesus' name," he croaked, voice torn, and for a heartbeat, the river green dim like a cloud crossing sun. Deuce found his air. He drew the blade he'd used on the bell and carved at the seam where bodies in that colony met. The thing thrashed, pipe steam hissed, warning strobed harder like a heartbeat showing off. "Vows!" Deuce roared. Tone, bruised and bloody-lipped, crawled and slammed the purge wide open. Clean water hammered the line. The monster's glow attenuated, pulsing to the rhythm of the flow. Over at the river, the Trent swelled. Smaller shapes boiled up and slid away as if something upstream had gagged. T-Lock shouted to his men, "Hold the wall! Turn them lights!" The floodlights burned so hot the housing smoked. The creature in mid-channel screamed without sound and sunk like a lie under cross-examination. Back at the plant, the colony drew itself taller, learning bipedal from memory. It lifted Holloway clear off his feet, and for a blink, he looked at Deuce like a man saying sorry for a mess he didn't make fast enough. "It knows my map," he said, calm in the old way. "So let me take it off the page." He shoved the oil bottle deep into the creature's throat of many throats and snapped the neck with his thumb. "Light it," he said. Deuce struck the flare, red hot. He pushed it to the oil. The creature seized, the green going white like winter thrown at neon. It stumbled backward into the purge pit, dragging steam and regret with it, then fell into the purge channel. Water ate it. Fire wrote its name and crossed it out. At the same moment, back on the block, the manhole lids lifted a half-inch, then laid back down like respect. Miss Clara's voice climbed one key and did not crack. Neighbors wept without shame. Malik shouted into the walkie, "I hear normal water," and then laughed the biggest 10-year-old laugh a city ever needed. The yard went quiet in that holy way after sirens, after fists, after funerals. The quiet that isn't empty, just finally done talking. Tone rolled to his knees, spit blood, grinned crooked. "We good?" Deuce looked at the pit. The water ran clear. The hum was gone. The bell was a lemery. The monster had nothing left to wear. He nodded once, which in our language means more than a speech.